Recently, some current and former Chinese diplomats met with American military commanders in Hawaii. Their message was, "We'll occupy the Ren'ai Reef, you stay away from us and mind your own business." The second Thomas Shoal, called Ren'ai Reef in Chinese, is in the South China Sea, west of the Philippines. The American expert who revealed this information stated that China's economic difficulties have forced Xi Jinping to accelerate his aggressions. The Chinese military's plans for 2027 are now being moved to 2024 or 2025. Chinese Coast Guard ships and warships are cruising around Huangyan Island and Ren'ai Reef, preventing Filipino fishing boats from approaching. These waters provide important protein for the Philippines. Chinese ships have used water cannons to attack Filipino supply ships, even threatening to attack ships docked at Ren'ai Reef. The source said that if China launches an attack, the United States will support the Philippines. He sees the occupation of Ren'ai Reef as a precursor to an attack on Taiwan. On March 22, 2023, the United States delivered hundreds of Javelin anti-tank missiles to the Philippines and deployed 17,500 U.S. troops to the U.S. naval base in Subic Bay. This year, the U.S. Navy obtained the right from the Philippines to use Subic Bay Naval Base. Previously, the United States had used the base through an oil agreement and had done construction projects there. In December of last year, the U.S. military used the USS Yosemite Trader oil tanker from Hawaii to transport 39 million gallons of fuel to Subic Bay. In 2019, an international tribunal ruled that China did not have sovereignty over some of the islands and reefs in the South China Sea. However, the Chinese government refused to acknowledge the ruling and continued to send Coast Guard and military forces there, effectively obstructing neighboring countries' development of oil and gas resources. China itself has sufficient funds to purchase oil, while small neighboring countries rely on oil and gas resources in the South China Sea for economic development. The Philippines is one of them. If the sovereignty issue is not resolved, the Philippines will be plunged into long-term poverty. With China making threats in the South China Sea, it seems a military response may be the only option. The Philippine government recently passed a notable legislation asserting sovereignty over some of China's artificial islands and reefs in the South China Sea. Although these islands and reefs were constructed and militarized by China, the Philippines claim sovereignty due to their proximity to Philippine territorial waters. Based on this legislation, it is not ruled out that the Philippines may take military action to land on these islands and reefs in the future. In such a scenario, military equipment such as anti-tank missiles will play a crucial role. Therefore, the 17,500 U.S. troops and the hundreds of anti-tank missiles will be of great use in the South China Sea, and of course, they can also be used to support the Taiwanese theater should war break out there. In March, Admiral John Aquilino, commander of the U.S. Indo-Pacific Command, told the U.S. Congress that the 1951 version of the U.S.-Filipino Mutual Defense Treaty needs to be clarified to ensure that the joint defense mechanism between the U.S. and the Philippines can be effectively activated in the event of attacks on the Philippine military. His request indicates that the U.S. military is preparing to deploy troops. On March 23rd, a serious maritime conflict occurred at the Ren'ai Reef. Chinese Coast Guard ships attacked a Filipino supply ship with water cannons while it was delivering supplies to the BRP Madre de Dios vessel. This attack caused severe damage to the Filipino ship, with several crew members injured, one of whom required over 10 stitches. This is the second such incident in March. In light of this, Philippine President Ferdinand Marcos signed a presidential decree on March 31st ordering the upgrading and expansion of the existing Maritime Commission. The new directive requires all government departments involved in South China Sea affairs to ensure that comprehensive evidence of Chinese encroachment is recorded and collected in detail. Additionally, if it can be confirmed that the incident occurs in Philippine territory, the joint U.S.-Philippine defense mechanism would be mobilized. At the same time, China CCTV released a video of the Southern Theater Command Navy's actual combat drills in the South China Sea, including scenes of sinking a so-called damaged armed fishing boat belonging to the enemy. This is clearly implying Filipino fishing boats. The exercise includes anti-missile and anti-aircraft subjects, obviously targeting the U.S. Military Corps' Maritime Raiding Regiment. Hu Shijing, a senior commentator for the CCP, publicly stated that the exercise is aimed at warning the Philippines and its international supporters. Hu Xijing also emphasized that if the Philippine Coast Guard and Navy attempt to challenge China, China will spare no effort to turn the South China Sea into a graveyard. Hu Xijing's remarks are seen as reflecting the official position of the Chinese Communist Party. Previously, due to U.S. House Speaker Nancy Pelosi's visit to Taiwan, Hu Xijing threatened, "We will escort and incidentally shoot down Pelosi's plane." The rapid deployment of aircraft carriers by the United States indicates the U.S.'s readiness, considering also the recent extensive use of missiles by the U.S. against the small Houthi armed group. In response to China's military demonstration video released through CCTV and Hu Xijing's provocative remarks, the U.S. will apparently take more decisive measures in response. The 2024 Bali-Catan U.S.-Philippines joint military exercise is scheduled to be held from April 22nd to May 8th, with the U.S. dispatching 11,000 personnel carrying over 400 containers of weapons and equipment, including advanced weapons such as the JLTV, light tactical vehicles, and CH-47 Chinook helicopters. The Philippines will have 5,000 soldiers participating. Australia will send 150 troops to participate in the exercise, France will send a frigate, and Japan and Asian countries will also send military observers. Japan is also sparing no effort to transport second-hand radar, fixed reconnaissance equipment, drones, and small combat ships to the Philippines. China is using its financial resources to develop its Coast Guard and maritime militia for geopolitical expansion, forcing neighboring countries to purchase weapons. However, the Philippines has limited resources, cannot afford expensive American products, and Taiwan and South Korea have few types of military equipment, making Japan's second-hand military equipment the preferred choice for the Philippine Coast Guard. If the unmanned equipment provided by Japan is deployed on disputed islands such as Renai Reef and Hualien Island, the Philippines will be able to significantly improve its reconnaissance and mount explosives to strike enemy targets when necessary without worrying about casualties. After taking office in 2022, Philippine President Marcos reoriented politically towards the United States. In early 2023, the United States and the Philippines signed a series of agreements, and currently there are 9 U.S. military bases in the Philippines. In September of last year, the U.S. and the Philippines began discussions on expanding U.S. military deployments on the east coast of the Philippines. In November 2023, the U.S. and Philippines conducted their first joint patrol. On January 3, 2024, the U.S. and Philippines held their second joint patrol near Renai Reef and Hualien Island. The Philippine Navy vessels involved in the operation included 4 ships and 2 military helicopters. The U.S. Navy sent 1 naval carrier, 1 cruiser, and 2 destroyers. The Philippine military praised this operation, believing that both sides had made a significant leap in interoperability. Interoperability refers to the ability of any frontline soldier to directly contact the command center and call upon various relevant strike forces from space, air, sea, land, and underwater. The command center can understand the information conveyed by the soldiers and make effective responses across all domains. After achieving interoperability, even a small Philippine patrol boat can call upon relevant U.S. strike forces. For decades, the United States has been exploring how to synergize its powerful forces with those of its weaker allies. Now, U.S. allies only need to sign an alliance agreement without investing huge sums of money and simply utilize their existing conditions to act as a signal point to receive support from the U.S. At the same time, the U.S.-Philippines Joint Patrol also, within 2 days, cleared the underwater deployments of buoys, anchor chains, hooks, and devices the Chinese Communist Party, CCP, secretly installed in the area. The Philippines has also made significant diplomatic progress. The U.S. has announced that on April 11th, Philippine President Marcos and Japanese Prime Minister Fumio Kishida will jointly visit the United States for a trilateral summit with President Joe Biden. U.S. officials revealed that the trilateral partnership of the U.S., UK, and Australia will be expanded to include Japan and the Philippines, forming a Five Eyes alliance with the acronym AUKUS. Once more countries join, a NATO-like alliance will be formed, completely isolating China. This alliance may even expand to Central Asia, Southeast Asia, and other broader regions. This will signify the U.S. achieving its strategic goal of returning to the Asia-Pacific region. Just as NATO once dissolved the Soviet Union, this military alliance in Asia may in the future the rule of the CCP. the CCP State Councillor Wang Yi to visit Australia in March, trying to sow discord in US-Australia relations and dismantle AUKUS, but it ended in failure, instead elevating relations between Australia, UK, and the US to the level of NATO. This is because Australia's military intelligence system is part of the Five Eyes alliance, controlled by Western countries led by the United States. Indonesia is now also siding with the United States. The country's newly elected president, Prabowo Subianto, visited Beijing on March 31st, met with Xi Jinping, and announced upon returning home that Indonesia would strengthen its relations with Japan. The Indonesian military has long been known for its pro-Western stance. President Prabowo is also from a military background. He facilitated the anti-China demonstration in Indonesia on May 4, 1998. In 1975, he held an Army Special Forces unit to suppress the East Timor independence movement backed by the CCP. It can be said that Prabowo has been a long-term opponent of the CCP. Indonesia has had a good relationship with Japan, and now Prabowo's statement indicates that Indonesia is clearly allying with the US on the issue of the South China Sea. Currently, 18 countries globally have signed maritime security agreements with the Philippines. Apart from the United States, there are 7 countries, including Vietnam, Australia, the UK, Canada, Germany, Japan, and the Czech Republic. Once China provokes conflict in the Philippine sovereign waters, these countries will intervene. Even India, which has remained silent on the South China Sea issue for many years, announced last June that it would provide preferential loans to the Philippines to help modernize its military. After the US, Japan, the UK, Australia, and the Philippines have established comprehensive ally relationships, action may be next. In this multilateral relationship, the role of the Philippines in the South China Sea can be likened to that of Israel in the Middle East, and Japan's importance in Northeast Asia is equivalent to that of Israel. Similarly, Ukraine's strategic position in Europe, as well as the roles of France and Poland, demonstrate the US's construction of an Israeli-like strategic layout globally, where it has key allies in critical regions that can rely on high-tech military systems and advanced weapons to counter potential adversaries. Through this approach, the United States can execute strategic tasks without directly deploying large-scale military forces. Although the Philippines may only be half as efficient using U.S. military equipment, it is still enough to surpass opponents in terms of technology and tactics, and the U.S. has absolute confidence in its military equipment and support system. In the future, these key allies may be able to independently maintain security and stability in their own regions. For example, the Philippines can help stabilize the area south of the Yangtze River in China. Japan can stabilize northeast China, and India can influence the southwest region of China. Corresponding countries will also play a role in China's northwest region, jointly constructing a multipolar strategic balance system. Huangyan Island and Ren'ai Reef are only 100 nautical miles from the Philippines, but over 1,000 nautical miles from mainland China. The Philippines is relatively more willing to quickly resolve long-standing territorial disputes. Meanwhile, a series of sanctions imposed by the U.S. on China, coupled with a strategy of decoupling and cutting off ties with China, have increased external pressure on China. In this context, China still needs to maintain support for Russia and engage in strategic deployments and troublemaking globally, putting tremendous pressure on its economy. If China's economy reaches a critical point, it may face rapid collapse. In a scenario where China's economy could collapse, issues such as the origin of the COVID-19 virus, territorial disputes in the South China Sea and East China Sea, geopolitical tensions in Northeast Asia, and tense relations with neighboring countries like Vietnam will all come to the surface. At that time, the resolution of the South China Sea issue could be quite dramatic.